Please rise in body or spirit.
Good evening, everyone. I wanted to do a brief introduction to our service tonight. It is The Women of the Passion, and it is a book that was written by a woman who was in the diocese where I was ordained in Fort Worth, and she brought it to our church there, and it was so moving that I've kind of dragged it along everywhere I've been. And we did it last year, and it was very meaningful, so that's what is happening tonight. I do want to mention that the readers are not listed in the correct places in the bulletin, so we can thank all the women who are up here in the left/right, depending on which way you're going, for reading this evening. And I say where human finitude comes in, God's grace fills in the cracks. So God will be here whether the names in the bulletin are correct. So thank you, everyone who's reading this evening, and I ask that you open your hearts to the words that we hear tonight.
Women are bound in blood with Christ. Several of us women gathered at Pilate's house when we heard Jesus had been taken there. Some nearly fainted when Pilate sentenced him to be crucified. After they led him away to be flogged, we all sat down to wait. Early on, there had been some tension between the women of Jerusalem and the Galilean women, but we soon discovered that our shared love of Jesus erased all the differences among us. Mary, the woman from Magdala, became a good friend to me. It's easy to see why Jesus so obviously loves her. It is equally easy to see why Peter is jealous of her. Peter, like so many of other men, is not used to having to take a woman into account in any way. None of the men are as comfortable with us women as Jesus is. It was that ease that gave me the courage to approach him the day near Capernaum. I had been bleeding for 12 long years. I had spent all my money on physicians, and still I bled. Because the law says a bleeding woman is unclean, and anyone who touches her is defiled. My family scorned me, so I lived all alone at the edge of town. but I had heard of the wonders Jesus worked. He was in great demand. There was always, it seemed, a crowd around him, so I thought, I won't bother him. If I can only touch his clothes, only the edge of his garment, that will be enough. I will be healed. So one day, when I saw a crowd of people crushing in on him, I came up from behind and edged my way through the crowd until I was close enough to fall on my knees and reach out and touch just the fringe of his garment. And I knew instantly that something had changed. I could feel it in my body. I felt lighter, and I knew. Then Jesus explained, "Who touched me?" Peter, the closest of his followers with him that day, said, "The entire crowd is pressing upon you. What do you mean, who touches you?" But Jesus turned and scanned the crowd, insisting, "I felt power go out from me. I want to know who touched me." I was terrified. I hadn't meant to offend. Trembling, I came forward and threw myself at his feet, so fearful that I would have to bleed yet again. But his hand was gentle on mine as he helped me up. And he said to me, "Daughter, your faith was the source of your healing. Be free and go in peace." I was astonished. He had touched me. He had not withheld his touch from me in fear of being tainted. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of joy. I knew in that moment that I would follow him wherever I could, and I resolved to model myself after the Magdalene. She had warned me that people would accuse us of being immoral because we traveled and studied with Jesus. The injustice of it often made me angry, but she just ignored them all with a serene confidence. But now, when she heard the news of Jesus' death sentence, all the color had drained from her face and her lips were white. The horror and grief on her face was a terrible thing to behold. I am ashamed to say that the first thought that crossed my mind was, what will happen to us women when he is not here? But then I thought, no matter what, I am bound in blood with this man. He made holy the blood that flows through me, and holy is the blood that will be spilled here today.
Station 2, Jesus takes up his cross. You free all daughters of Sarah bent from the weight of sin. I can't believe they are really going to kill this innocent man. Why? He changed my life. He cured me. After 18 years of being bent almost double, 18 years of terrible pain, 18 years of being told it was because I was possessed of demons, 18 years of being alternately shunned and preached at, he set me free. It was the Sabbath, and I had gone to the synagogue to pray. It was usually my only outing of the week, since I rarely risked the scorn of the streets. I told him, teaching when I entered, and tried to listen without being noticed. To my dismay, he called to me. I saw the other men look at me, and I shrank from their disgust. But he smiled and beckoned, and my fears dropped away. As I walked up to him, the other men drew back. But he didn't shrink away. Instead, he stood up and, to my surprise, put his hands on me. It felt so good. No human being had touched me except to shove me aside and abuse me since I was 11 years old. That was when my back had begun to curve. By the time I was 12, I was bent as an old woman. Now, in my 29th year, someone was touching me with kindness. If he had done nothing more than that, it would have been enough. But he didn't stop there. He said, "You are rid of your infirmity." As he spoke, a warmth flowed from his hands through my shoulders and down my spine. The pain vanished. Then he put his hand under my chin and lifted my head. As he did so, I stood up straight. Alleluias rang from my mouth as I looked skyward for the first time in years. I raised my arms over my head and praised God, for I knew whence had come this blessing. But then a synagogue official came bustling up, and he was very angry. There are 6 days each week for manual labor. Come and be healed on one of those days. Do not come on the Sabbath, he announced to the crowd that had gathered. And then he turned wrathfully to Jesus. I was horrified. I wanted no harm to come to this man on my account. But Jesus just looked at him calmly and said, "How hypocritical! Do you not untie your donkey or your ox and take it for water on the Sabbath? This woman, this daughter of Sarah, has been held in bondage for 18 years. Why not release her on the Sabbath?" And the officials were confused, but the people and I were not. We were filled with joy at his wonders and his words. I tried to kneel before him, but he stopped me. Holding my hand, what we said then remains between the two of us. But I will tell you this, I followed this man to Jerusalem, and I know, as I watched him take up the cross, that I will follow him anywhere, even to Calvary and beyond.
Station 3, Jesus falls for the first time. You have heard our cries. When the women began keening, my heart jumped into my throat. This is dangerous. The Romans won't appreciate our public grief over the death of a man they have named a criminal. They might arrest all of us, too. But these fears only last a second. Then my heart fills with admiration for the courage of the other women, and I, too, lift my voice in protest and lament and walk with them behind the soldiers who surround Jesus and his terrible burden. The men have all disappeared, but we women will not leave his mother, and she will not leave him. I can't blame her. I, too, am a mother. I followed him from southern Phoenicia, and I, too, will follow him to the death. I am a Greek, by birth a Syro-Phoenician, by religion a Canaanite. The Jews call me a pagan. I am a foreigner in their culture, outside their God's covenant, and thus despised. But unlike many of them, I knew from the second I saw him that this was a very special man. He had come quietly to the region of Tyre and Sidon, not wanting anyone to know he was there. But I recognized him as a holy man, and in my great need, threw myself at his feet. "Have mercy on me and my daughter, for she is possessed by the devil," I pleaded. Jesus didn't say anything, but I wouldn't give up. My daughter's life was at stake. I would have stayed there until I died to get help for her. Finally, some of the men with him said, "Give her what she wants. She is shouting at us. She will never go away." Jesus turned to me and said, "Is it fair to take the children's food and throw it to their dogs?" "Yes," I said immediately, "for the dogs eat the scraps from the family table." Jesus smiled at me. "Great is your faith. Be it done as you desire." I leapt up and ran home. When I rushed into my daughter's room, she was sitting up in bed smiling. The demon was gone. In joy, I praised God. Now, as my daughter and I walk along behind him, our grief rings out against the walls of Jerusalem. My daughter gasps as we see him fall. His mother is standing at a turn in the street, and her hands reach out, just as they must have done countless times when he was an infant learning to walk. He pushes himself up and staggers on. Would that I could give him my life to spare his.
Station 4, Jesus meets his mother. Body of my body, blood of my blood. I am standing next to his mother when he sees her. He had risen from his fall and walked only a few steps when he raised his head as if she had called out to him, though she made no sound. I think my heart will break at the look of gentle compassion that appears on his face at the sight of her. She reaches out her hand and touches his cheek, cupping it with the tender gesture of a mother's from the beginning of time. Their eyes, so alike, meet and hold. Neither of them weeps, although Mary's entire body looks broken with grief. The soldiers are uneasy, looking away. None of them are very old, and I suspect they can't help but think of their own mothers. Finally, one of them puts his hand on Jesus' back, almost gently, and says in a gruff voice, "Keep moving." His mother's hand falls back to her side, wet with blood from his face. She looks after him, then slowly puts the reddened hand to her face in grief.
Station 5. The cross is laid at the Simon of Cyrene. Have mercy on me, for I am heavily burdened. Let all fear lose itself to your will. I am standing with my husband, Simon of Cyrene, wondering what is all that noise is about. We have just come into the city and have barely caught our breath, when suddenly a Roman soldier calls my husband. You! The soldier says, come here. I'm shocked. We are not common people. Simon is an important man. Our community is in Ethiopia. We have come to worship the temple as our people have from the time of Solomon. Why, we have a list of Solomon's wives among our ancestors, and this soldier treats my husband like a slave? They grab Simon and pull him into the street, and they do so. I see this poor wretch bent underneath the weight of the crossbeam. The soldiers order Simon to take the beam from him. I'm afraid, I'm very angry. How dare they thrust Simon into this mess? Women are crying and carrying on as if this important man, not some common criminal. Simon is an important man, not this other man. We are not part of this. But Simon, who cannot bear to see a donkey suffer, gently takes his beam from the poor man, saying as he does, I will bear your burden for a short while, sire. The bloody man lifts his head and nods. Sire, what on earth would Simon call this man, this criminal, sire? But then I see Simon's face. I know something important is happening. Simon is a proud man, not given to honoring without a cause. And here he is, bowing to a bloody wreck of a man, and he takes the beam from him. I open my mouth to protest, but Simon, who knows me all too well, looks up at me and says, all is well, come follow us. Marveling I do so, wondering how all this will end.
Station 6, a woman wipes the face of Jesus. Woman and man, all are made in the image of God. I wait for him by my door. I know he will have to pass by here on the way out to Golgotha. They all do, all the ones condemned to be crucified. And so I wait, hoping I can give him a tiny bit of comfort. I know they have beaten him. In some awful way, it is Roman kindness. For the weaker he is when they hang him on that cross, the shorter his ordeal will be. I hear the keening of the women long before I see them. The Roman soldiers turn the corner at the bottom of my street, and there he is. A richly dressed black man has been pressed into carrying the crossbeam, probably because the soldiers are afraid Jesus will die before they can kill him. Jesus is already staggering on the steps of the narrow street, and my heart breaks at the sight. As he slowly nears my door, I see in horror that they have put a crown of thorns onto his head, some of the soldiers' idea of fun. The thorns have pierced his scalp, and blood courses down his face, nearly blinding him. As the soldiers push past, I remove my veil and shove myself towards him. To my surprise, the soldiers let me through. I bend beside him and put my veil to his face and wipe away the blood. He puts his hand over mine, holding the soft cloth to his face for a few seconds. Then he hands it back to me with a sigh and a small smile. A soldier grabs my shoulder and sets me aside, and Jesus continues on his slow, painful way up the sloping street. Tears begin to run down my face, and I lift my veil to wipe them away. As I look at my veil, I nearly scream, for there, looking back at me, is the true image of his face. I hold it to my heart and weep.
Station 7, Jesus falls a second time. From the little she had, she has put in everything. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Even with the help of the one called Simon, he soon falls again. As he does, a great groan goes up from the women, and our keening grows louder. How different he is this day from the day I first encountered him in the temple. I had gone to give my tiny mite into the temple treasury, hoping it could help some other person in need. As I turned from doing this, I found him smiling at me. "Look," he called out to the men with him, "this poor widow's gift is far worth more than all the other contributions, for they gave of their abundance from the money that they had left over, while she gave all the money she had from the little she has to live on." At first I was embarrassed to have all these men looking at me, but then I realized he was not making fun of me, but instead was doing me an honor. I had heard about this man's teaching, but I had been too shy to get near enough to hear him. I had never had time to study very much, and I was afraid I was too stupid to understand this great man's teachings. But as I heard more that day, I realized many of his teachings were like this: simple stories of everyday people used to illustrate important points. So I stayed to listen, and in listening, discovered new depths in myself. That's why, when he fell again, I looked away, unable to bear the sight of his humiliation. This man changed my life. The least I can do is be with him as they take his.
Station 8, Jesus addresses the women of Jerusalem. All who pass by, look and see, is there any sorrow like my sorrow? Daughters, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. When he painfully pulls himself up from where he has fallen, he sees our grieving group of women. His look causes us to fall silent. Then he speaks, his voice soft with pity. Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are coming when people will say, "Blessed are those who are childless, blessed are the wombs that have never given birth, and the breasts that have never nursed." The words fall among us like burning brands. The crowded, narrow street grows quiet as he speaks, and his voice seems to pick up volume as it bounces off the stone walls. He continues, "Then they will say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,'
and to the hills, "Cover us up." For if this is what they do when the wood is green, what will happen when the wood is dry? "What does it mean?" a woman whispers. And I think, he is the green wood, still alive and with us, and these fools are killing him. If we can do this to this godly man, what hope is there for us when we can no longer see him or touch him or hear him? And visions of women burning, of girl children going up in smoke fill my horrified eyes, and I fall to my knees, moaning. Around me, the women move on, the sound of their grief washing up like waves against the uncaring walls of the city.
Station 9, Jesus falls a third time. Our bond with you strengthens our bond with one another. When they arrested Jesus, the men urged us all to go into hiding, fearing the Romans would do a general sweep of the area in an effort to catch all of us who followed him. But his mother refused to leave. Hearing this, I told my husband, Cleopas, to go with the others. I would stay. Cleopas protested, fearing for me. But I told him that I would be safe, for the Romans would never suspect mere women of being dangerous. We agreed to meet later in the upper room of the house where we had shared Passover Seder with Jesus the day before. As I watched Cleopas leave, I realized it was the first time we had been apart in years, certainly since we had decided to follow Jesus. For the past year, we had traveled with him as he taught, watched over him as he slept, marveled at the miracles he performed, and wondered at the things he told us. Most of all, we loved him. Our bond with one another had been strengthened by our bond to him. It is that bond that endangers Cleopas. He has been seen with him too often. But my womanhood renders me invisible to the Romans, to many of my own people as well. Women are simply part of the background, regarded by Jewish and Roman authorities alike as non-persons, unimportant, negligible. We Marys often had talked of this amongst ourselves and reminded one another that our namesake, the prophet Miriam, had also been thrust into the background. So, we know we stay here in relative safety, as long as we don't create too much of an uproar or irritate powerful men. But we are all used to living with such strictures. They are part of being a woman, like water is part of the sea. That's why, as we walk through the streets behind Jesus and the soldiers, our lament rising above the heads of the shoppers and the merchants in their doorways, one part of my brain is busy gauging the reactions of the Romans. Are they getting angry? Are we pushing our luck too far? Deep as my grief is, for his mother's sake, I know I have to stay alert for any change in their mood that might endanger her. Each time he falls, my heart breaks anew. When he came face to face with his stricken mother, I felt as if I were choking on wormwood and gall. And now, just as we approach the city gate, he falls yet again. My heart lurches, for he does not move. Is he dead? Is it over? Hope and grief war in my soul. But then one of the soldiers grabs a bucket from an old woman mopping a shop and pours the dirty water over him. As he stirs, his mother groans. It isn't over yet. He rises and walks unsteadily out through the gate. We follow, walking towards Golgotha.
Station 10, Jesus is stripped of his garments. May our children sit beside you and drink of your cup. As we walk through the city gate and onto that dreary hillside, I think I might faint. This cannot be happening. When he fell that third time, I thought, it's over, he is dead. And for a second, a mad hope possessed me. Maybe the suffering could end like this, instead of the terrible travesty of a tree. My two sons, James and John, had gone away with the other men, but I suspect John will soon return. He will never let Jesus die alone, even if it means risking his own arrest. Both my boys have been with Jesus from the time he called to them while they were mending nets with my husband Zebedee in our family fishing boat on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. He is their cousin, but we all knew he was something very special, meant for bigger things than carpentry or catching fish. When I began to understand just how big, I went to him and requested a favor. "What do you want?" he asked me. "That these sons of mine may sit beside you, one on your right hand and one on your left, when you are in your kingdom." "You do not know what you're asking," he said gently. And turning to my sons, he asked, "Can you drink the cup that I will drink?" And they replied, "Yes, we can." "So be it," he said. "You shall drink my cup, but positions of power are not mine to give. They are awarded by God, our Creator." After that, Jesus teased my sons, calling them the sons of thunder. Some suppose he's referring to my husband, but our whole family knows he's referring to me, Solomon. I am ambitious for my boys, but I also know that wherever this man goes, I want my sons to go. For good or ill, this is their destiny, and that of my husband and me. And now as I watch him standing on that windswept hillside, I am realizing just how bitter this cup we must all drink will be. I keep remembering him as a little boy, this bright-eyed nephew full of life and joy. His smile would light up the entire house, and his laughter would send us all off in fits of giggles. Now, all the laughter is drowning in tears. The Roman soldiers set about their task methodically. Some of them began preparing the cross, while others strip him of his garments, dividing them among themselves, casting lots for his cloak. His poor, abused body looks so frail as he stands there exposed to the jeers of the crowd. One soldier offers him some wine mingled with gall, but after one taste, he turns his head away. I take his mother's hand, and someone takes mine. It is John, come to be with us at the end.
Station 11. Jesus is nailed to the cross. Our hearts feel every blow of that hammer. As I watch them strip him and pull him down onto the cross, I long to scream, "Stop this madness. This is an innocent man, a good man. I know he saved my life." I was a maid in the household of an important merchant in Jerusalem, young and foolish. I had been betrothed since I was a child to a man I had never seen. But the merchant's son convinced me he loved me, and I allowed him to come to my bed. His mother found us. She called me an adulteress, locked me in my room. I was terrified. Although the law clearly states that both the man and woman are to be put to death, my lover is important in the community. I knew nothing would happen to him. But the law says a betrothed virgin is to be stoned to death. At daybreak, they dragged me to the temple. There was a man sitting there surrounded by people. The temple officials threw me on the ground in front of him. I knew already I was a dead woman. And they said, "Rabbi, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. The law says we should stone her. Tell us, what do you say?" I was confused. Who was this man? Why were they asking him? What were they up to? The man ignored them, drawing with his finger in the dust near my face. But they kept looking at him, and he kept ignoring them. I finally calmed down enough to focus on what he was doing. There, in the dust, He had written the unspeakable name of God. What did this mean? But the temple officials persisted until he looked up and said quietly, "Let the one among you who has not sinned be the one to throw a stone." Then bending down, he drew some more in the dust, smiling sideways at me. One by one, those who had accused me silently slipped away until he and I were alone. "Where have they gone?" he asked me. I said nothing, shaking my head in bewilderment. "Tell me, has no one condemned you?" He then asked. "No one, sir," I said softly, "and neither do I. Go now and sin no more." He helped me to my feet, smiled at me, turned me toward the door, and gave me a gentle push. "Go," he said with a smile. And I did. I went, I got my belongings, and set out to find the company of Jesus. He had given me back my life. I would now give it to him. And now these fools are going to kill him. I hear a terrible groan from his mother and look up. Oh, dear God. They are not tying him to the cross. They are nailing him to it. My heart feels every blow of that hammer. As they jerk his feet together and begin to driving the nails through that precious skin, his body moves convulsively upward, and I fall, driven to the ground by my grief.
Station 12, Jesus dies on the cross. And I know if my grief were a river, I watch them stretch his naked body out on the cross. Even in this moment of complete vulnerability, he is magnificent. As I look at him through eyes blurred with tears, he is no longer just one man, but seems instead to embody all of suffering humankind. Could any human endure such a burden? I would die in his place without a moment's regret. That they should touch one hair on that adored head, hurt 1 inch of that beloved body, sickens me with grief and rage. I have loved him forever. It seems, even though I met him only 3 years ago when he was teaching near my home in Magdala. I knew from the moment we first spoke that he had loved me from before I was born. I would have loved him even if he had not cured me of my affliction, taken from me that deep-seated sadness that had clouded my days ever since I had achieved menarche. For me, becoming a woman had meant confinement in a prison of sadness. I seemed always to walk in darkness. I yearned to end this soul-eating pain. Then I met him, and the sun rose in my life. With a glance, he removed the pall of sadness that had dragged my life in the dust. With a touch, He lifted me into a realm of spiritual brightness that dazzled my eyes and delighted my soul. He called me beloved disciple. And when the inevitable rumors began, I went crying to him. He gentled my tears away and said, "Mary, feel my hand on your face. I am touching the image of God. Nothing, they say, can change that. Not in my eyes, and certainly not in the eyes of the one who made you. And know this," he said, "though they may try, they will never be able to cast you into the darkness. My peace is upon you forever. My peace is upon you forever." I cling to those words as they stretch out his body on that dreadful cross. I brush tears from my eyes and see more clearly what they are about to do. Oh, Holy One, help us. They are nailing him to the cross. I turn to shield his mother from the sight, but it's too late. She lets out a guttural sound like that of a woman in labor. I put my arm around her shoulders and feel her slight body shudder with every blow of that accursed hammer. When they pull the cross upright and drop it into that hole in the rock, I think the jolt will tear his arms from his body. And for a terrible, interminable time, we wait as he slowly weakens. Finally, I hear him give himself up to his Father. Without looking, I know he is gone from me. And I know if my grief were a river, the whole earth would drown.
Station 13. The body of Jesus is placed in the arms of his mother. Do not call me Naomi, which means pleasant. As I waited in pain for him to be born, now I wait in pain for him to die. I cannot take my eyes off him, for every second that passes takes him farther from me. Where is my bright angel now? I would be the God-bearer, the angel said. Well, I did my part, and now here he is, this child of God, dying in a dismal, dusty place. Anger washes through me, followed by new waves of grief. For days I've been an ocean, racked by storms of emotion that threaten to drown my soul, kill my faith. This is too much to ask of me, beloved. I believed your promises. I believed them when I pushed him into the world with only Joseph and the animals as midwives. I believed them when the shepherds and the kings came. I believed them when my angel warned Joseph to take us into Egypt. And I believed them when, at the temple, he disappeared. I feared you had already taken him from me then, much too soon. We searched for him for 3 whole days, days like years. When we found him teaching in the temple, he said he had to be about your business. But Joseph and I persuaded him to wait a bit longer. And when the time came, it was still too soon by my heart's reckoning. But I had vowed to do your will, and so I helped him any way I could. Many times that meant stepping aside. Occasionally it meant helping others understand. And nearly always it meant biting my tongue when I feared he'd gone too far, too fast. But this, oh beloved, is this necessary? Must our child suffer so? We are not worthy of such pain. Take him now before I go mad with rage and pain. But stay, do not take him yet. This is the body of my body, the blood of my blood. I will devour him with my eyes, eating his body, drinking his blood. I will carry him within me forever. His soft summons of mother reaches me as if in a dream. I move as close to his feet as the soldiers will permit, John beside me. Ema, my dying son says to me, indicating John, "Behold, your son." And to John he says, "Behold, your mother." His voice is almost too faint to hear. "I am thirsty," he rasps. I turn in silent appeal. The young soldier at the foot of the cross hesitates. Then, with a slight shrug, he puts a sponge soaked in cheap wine onto his lance and hoists it to Jesus. He wets his lips and speaks again, his words tearing into my heart like knives. "It is finished." Then he cries out to you, beloved, "Abba, into your hands I commend my spirit." He drops his head and his eyes meet mine. And as I watch, the light dies. I hear a scream and wonder who it is. The sky darkens, thunder rumbles, and a great silence falls. My body feels numb. It seems as if the darkness lasts forever. After a time, however, the light returns. Shaken, the soldiers begin taking my child down from the cross. One of them, a centurion, I think, motions to them to give me the body. I sink down on a rock, and with a curious gentleness, the soldiers hand him to me, draping him across my lap. I cradle him, my babe, now man. His head lolls against my breast, and his soft hair strokes my chin. I gently close his eyes, and with my veil, wipe the blood off his face. I have no tears left. My eyes are spent with weeping. My soul is in tumult. My heart is poured out in grief because of the downfall of my people. John says something to me, and I look up, my eyes blazing. "Do not call me Naomi, which means pleasant. Call me Mara, which means bitter. For the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." John looks shocked. "Well, what do I care? What are all the prophecies to me now? What do I care for all the fine words of me? My child is dead." Agony forces my head back, and I scream to the heavens, "My son! I want my son back!"
Station 14. Jesus is laid in the tomb. Sorrowful mother, all humanity shares your loss. I press my broken son to me, as if I can absorb him once again into my body. Oh, beloved, have mercy on me. Pour your tender mercies down upon me and help me, help me. I have no strength left. And once again, you send my bright angel. I feel the warmth at my back, the angel's hand upon my bent head, and hear the familiar voice. Mary, blessed of all women, do not be afraid, for God is pleased with you. And I remember the promise, all will be well. All manner of things will be well. I allow them to take my son's body from me. They are telling me it is time to prepare him for burial. Salome has brought spices, and Joseph of Arimathea has gotten permission to bury him in a nearby tomb. And so I go through the ritual motions. As I once laid his sweet body so tenderly in a cradle, I now lay his broken body tenderly in the tomb. The smell of sweet herbs filled the air. For one last time, I kiss his mortal face, and then gently cover it with a sheet of fine white fabric. My hand caresses the soft cloth, and I smile. Would that I had had such fine cloth to clothe him when he lived. But I have no bitterness left. My heart already is looking ahead. We walk outside, and James and John push the great stone over the entrance. I stand looking at the tomb. How long, beloved? How long? As my dear friends move about me, peace settles on me. I am again one with your will. Let it happen as you say.